This is a Niche Radio podcast. Subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or log into www.nicheradio.co.za.
Welcome to SuperDads. Today we are continuing with the light series. We are carrying on with low-level light or low-level LLT or photobiomodulation, also known as PBM. And we have a very highly skilled specialist and inventor in the technology from Vielight. His name is Dr. Liu Lim. And I'm really a great fan of his work and his company and the team that they've put together and the type of technology they've built and the work they do in clinical trials, because the effect or impact it has on people gives them real hope. Typically when you have a neurodegenerative disease or related mitochondrial disease, often a doctor might say there's nothing more you can do, or start counting your night sleeps because, life could disappear. However, looking at the work and what people have experienced and using this type of technology with other assisted protocols, there is a new breath of hope, a new level of understanding, and sort of tears comes to people's eyes when they have their loved one back to being able to converse with them compared to before. So Liu, thank you so much for being on the show with us today here on SuperDads.
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting me.
So let's cover, you've been in this for a number of years. You've been in different interviews, different news pieces and like documentaries, but everyone has a personal story or personal health failure or something that drives them into this type of niche technology or niche type of health. There's not something that one just thinks up, okay, when I'm born as a child, I want to go into red light therapy. There normally is a personal story associated to it. So what was your personal drive or passion that got you into red light?
Well, I think it goes back to the mid-90s when I was in the Silicon Valley. We were involved in displays, lasers, that kind of stuff. And so during that time, people talk about various new technology, and there was this thing about some Russians. They have health centers that inject very low power laser optic fiber through optic fiber into your vein. And then you get these fabulous results, and people go to these health centers, lie down for half an hour, and get this light injected into the vein. They come for I think 10 sessions, and then they get these incredible results. But now here's the physics about light. When you talk about red light, for example, which was what was used at the time, red light does penetrate the skin. If you point a beam of red light to your fingers, you can see some of it passing through it. So there is, in my mind, there is no need to go through an invasive process like this to achieve the results. So the question is asked, okay, how do we do that? I started with the idea of going through the nose because the nose is rich in blood vessels, vasculature, and they're close to the surface. So, why do we pick the nose is that particular reason, and you can do this scratch test, scratch anywhere in your body, and see which part bleeds first, and it's most likely the nose, right? So it's logical, and we experimented it. We use just deliver a red low-level laser to the nose, twice the power of what they used in the instrument that injected light into the vein. So same result. So that's the whole idea. And it started from there. We've had to wait a few years for the solid-state technology to develop enough for us to start doing consumable, usable devices. So that's where it started. A lot of studies were published, and we kept developing. And then now we've come to a stage where I think we're ahead of everybody else as far as researching and delivering usable home use devices to help with the brain. So we have an array of products, and that's where we are right now.
And I think what's key thing with the red light is that it holds a key value when it comes to studying the process of post-traumatic reorganization. of microcirculation, the recovery of brain tissues. Now, it sort of sounds like a mouthful, but I think we put in layman's terms, it's kind of like breathing new life into a brain cell, or into the cells of the blood. So, waters that we're using, water chemistry, and water in our body produces a special type of water that can be programmable by light. And, we cover the UV light, which our body naturally produces UVC light. But red light seems to have a very unique quality and principle. So outside in the sunlight, we always have 42% infrared light. But the kind of light that you're also working with, everyone tends to get carried away with the whole power density issue, that there must be this immense amount of light. The more power is going to create more of an effect. But you've demonstrated that if you can feel heat, then that's a bad thing. And you just need to have the right frequency, the right wavelength of red light that's going to create the most efficient health boosting effect with the cells.
Yeah, you don't really want heat because it makes you comfortable. It doesn't do any harm. But heat is really, it's agitation of the water molecule, and you get this sensation. But in the field of photobiomodulation, you want to deliver enough dose to the mitochondria so that the mitochondria can respond. And in this field, it's pretty well established that the fundamental mechanism is with the mitochondria. There is a photoreceptor in it, in an enzyme called the cytochrome C oxidase. So mitochondria is just tiny. It's just a tiny little organelle. So it's very, obviously when you're small like that, it's sensitive, and too much of anything can damage it. So you just have to deliver enough for you to respond, and then go ahead to synthesize all these gene transcription factors that get translated into healing and so on. So the key is really in getting into that process is not about the mitochondria producing energy, what it does, and make you feel warm and so on, which is quite often mistaken. Is really within the transcription of the genes, and everything we do, whatever function we do is modulating proteins and so on, is all to do with the gene. So that's all you need to do. And the interesting thing here is, at a certain low level, the mitochondria or the cells that are performing sub-homeostasis will respond. So if you keep all these parameters in control, it doesn't get overstimulated, it doesn't do any damage.
So just to sort of help some of our listeners, because we cover the word mitochondria often, and it's about drilling it in again and again, always trying to find a more simple explanation for them. So with the mitochondria, we've got the 5 different phases, and at the first phase is where the mitochondria DNA sits right next to it. And what's key here is by the red light activating, stimulating that first part of the mitochondria, being right next to the mitochondria DNA, that has the best hope of actually regenerating or reprogramming the mitochondria to start producing healthy and more efficient DNA. Would that be an accurate assessment?
Actually, it involves the respiratory chain. And, it is closely identified. Obviously, it is where the use of the mitochondria is in the respiratory chain, where it goes through these 4 terminals that ends up with producing energy. And the other thing it does is, in the last terminal, the cellular energy is ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is what everybody associates mitochondria with. But ATP is also a signaling molecule. It also produces a low level of ROS, which is like an antioxidant, which is reactive oxygen species. So it is, a lot of it is not a good thing, but at low level, ROS also leads to this transcription of genes. And then the CM and, bunch of other things we probably haven't discovered. But the other thing it does is very often the respiratory chain is clogged up if it's not functioning properly, and delivering red or near infrared light actually helps dissociate nitric oxide back into the body. And nitric oxide has this role of, relaxing or dilating blood vessels, which improves the circulation, blood circulation in the body, and some other things too. So that's that's really the fundamental kind of mechanism behind photobiomodulation.
I think also the key thing that with the red light specifically, the effect red light, again, we're talking about for our listeners, the spectrum of red light. So this goes all the way from the 600 nanometers all the way up to the 3000, but we're focusing here on the 660 range up to 810, 850, around that section. And what that light is key when it impacts water, is actually enables water to shrink, water to condense. And in our mitochondria, that's actually going to shrink the distance of the respiratory proteins. So, normally we think of water as a good conductor of electricity or electrons, but in the mitochondria, water is actually not a very good conduit of electricity or electrons. And that's why we want to rather have those respiratory protein distances shrinked as much as possible. So it's a shorter distance and more efficient for those electrons and protons to have their interaction along the mitochondria phase. And also it helps compress everything. So that's why, the whole ATP phase, the generator that pushes out this ATP, it pushes out water, pushes out CO2, it's going to be a lot more efficient. It's going to be turning what we would say if our cell architecture was seen as a poor set of health, would be a Ford Fiesta. The red light helps switch it up into a Ferrari engine. Would that be a pretty good assessment for our listeners?
Yeah, there is actually now that you mention it, there's increasing recognition that photobiomodulation also involves the restructuring of water. It does also help. It leads to pretty much the same thing. And where it is looking like it is, I think, in the region of 900 nanometers and above. So below that is mainly on the respiratory chain, and above that, we see actually good outcomes even with it's been published, wavelength of 1064 or 10. I think some of the researchers have pretty much figured out that it involves water rather than the chromophores, like cytochrome C oxidase.
Yeah, I mean, the water is an amazing thing of how it has such an important impact. One of our previous guests on the show was Professor Gerald Pollack, the fourth phase of water, and talking about the exclusion zone and how red light has an immense impact on actually increasing the exclusion zone, which is needed for the folding and unfolding of proteins. So again, all these things have so many different interactions. It's amazing how red light has such an impact. I understand there's also value in also using UV light, but the problem is with medical testing and application development, it's a lot harder to develop technology using UV light, and it's a lot easier with red light. Would that be correct?
Yeah, when I look at doing a non-invasive modality for the body, everything kind of fit in with red, near infrared, because they have penetration quality. UV light and blue does not penetrate beyond the most superficial area of the skin. It is great for, there's quite a bit of work done in its antimicrobial properties. Of course, when you go to UV, then you don't want too much power because of the risk of mutating DNA. So I know in the past when people talk about blood irradiation therapy, they talk about UV, where they take out a portion of the blood from the body, cycle it through a chamber where they direct UV light, which seems to transform and improve people's health. So part of it is antimicrobial. Some of the other things I'm not really familiar with, but I think they were looking at the outcomes and people were feeling better. So I think it's not used widely used in North America. I think it doesn't have regulatory approval, but I think some parts of the world still use that.
No, because like you said, again, it comes down to what you mentioned earlier about power density, is that our body, especially our skin, actually generates and emits its own extremely low frequency UVC. And normally, NASA tells us that UVC light can't penetrate the Earth because of the ozone, but our own body, our own skin generates its own UVC, and this is important for certain biological reactions. But again, it just re-emphasizes this whole discussion that, with using the Vielight being intranasal or cranial unit, it's not about power density of this mega power. It's about having the right frequency and the right harmonic of it to actually penetrate and stimulate the body to be much more efficient, or the cell architecture to be more efficient, and programming the water within the body.
Yeah, actually, now that you mentioned it, I think there's some work done. That there is other UV at very, very low power, low dose of power, whatever, generated or blue light endogenously by the cells. And it seems to be that they use it for communication or something. So it's, I think this work is really interesting, talking about biophotons. So now, touching on what you mentioned there about red and infrared lights, applying how much power you need and so on. There is a group, and they publish, I think they're well cited, proposing that you really need, say, to treat the brain, you need like 10 to 15 watts. Okay, just think about it. Watts of like what we use, 810 nanometers. If you use laser, it's probably 808 nanometers. So laser is collimated. It is, it can be high density, and 10 to 15 watts is a lot of power. So just think about it. We use maximum of 100 milliwatts. So 100 milliwatts is, like 1/10 of 1 watt, like maximum. And actually, yeah, and you think about it, we use very little power, but ultimately, to demonstrate whether it works or not is to have measurable outcomes from the body, right? In our case, when we do the brain, we assess people and how they improve. We've published, we've done a number of cases for Alzheimer's disease. We have a study that's being written up now on healthy brains, and when we direct, say, gamma to the brain, we see very clear, consistently right across the board of brain, the power in alpha, beta, gamma, these high oscillation brain waves increasing in power, and it decreases the power of the slow waves. So this is really important findings because, first of all, it proves that the brain does respond to the low power we use, and the other thing is what we are showing is this modulation of high and low frequency is exactly what you need to treat a lot of conditions: Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, chronic pain, schizophrenia, autism. They have the opposite of what we're trying to produce. So that is, showing it, and these studies that trying to use, propose high power, has been based on dead tissues, cadavers, sheep brains that are, there's no signaling in dead tissue. So people, you just got to recognize that, there are indirect signaling like purinergic signaling, where as we produce ATP, there are receptors all over our body that receive the ACTP and the ATP, and actually can create a cascade. So ATP produced by the mitochondria has also been, associated with it being a neurotransmitter because it just transmits signals in a cascading form, especially in the brain. Then last month, there was a study published that's very interesting because through imaging, they showed that the skull has vascular channels connecting to the brain. So you can modulate the skull producing, in fact, this study was, was associating with neutrophils, the immune system. But if you direct the infrared light to the bone, anywhere in your body, the bone marrow actually synthesizes stem cells, red blood cells, immune cells, a bunch of things. And if there is a vascular channel, hey, all you need to do is just irradiate the skull. So I thought that was a very good study, very relevant to what we do.
Yeah, it's kind of like the body creates its own superconductor system. That's, your stimulation one point creates an almost instant signaling to another whole different part of the body, which it's fascinating. And a lot of the stuff seems very counterintuitive, because when we apply the red light, we actually, we're slowing down the heteroplasmic rate of the mitochondria. So we're helping reduce the effect of aging in a way, or slowing down the effect of aging. And, by slowing that down, we're also helping with apoptosis and autophagy of the cells. So, it could, in the same way, it can help very well with co-treatments with cancer, or co-treatments, because anything with the brain is linked to everywhere else in the body. So, if we treat it there, it's going to make this greater impact. And also, this whole effect with non-native EMF, we're finding that the alpha waves in particular are, with persons being affected, they're becoming much more docile. And we actually want it to be quite active and irregular, these patterns. And it's interesting when we see with your studies how when the red light's applied, these alpha waves are re-spurred up and they back into this healthier state of, high spikes and flux densities and irregularities in this, what a healthy brain should be.
Yeah, we are finding that actually the way we do it, pointing to the hubs of the default mode network, it seems to restore its integrity. And when we do it, when, say, you close your eyes, do nothing, we put the EEG on you and we do this, directing this gamma wave, near infrared light, it actually seems to strengthen the alpha, because when you close your eyes, do nothing, you're actually in alpha state. And at the same time, you're also in the default mode network, which is like a template network of the brain. If your default mode network is healthy, it just helps with your overall health of the brain. So that is actually shown. We've looked at the connectivity as well. Connectivity is very significantly influenced by what we do with, say, the headset. So you may not feel anything, like I don't feel anything, but I get sensitive people who really feel the flow. They can feel how it's flowing. So all very in meditation, we are doing a meditation study now. We've done in some of this conference where long-term meditators, it's published, long-term meditators like yogis and monks and people who meditate for many hours a day or a week and so on, the accumulation, they have this persistent endogenous gamma in the brain that doesn't exist in the normal people. We still, people are still learning why, but it seems that if you're at that capability, you have endogenous gamma. And when we direct gamma, we help it along. So these people, when it might take them some time, it could take many minutes or hours to get into that state, they get into it immediately. So that's really, really interesting. And we have experimented with beyond gamma at 40 hertz, actually, we've experimented up to 200 hertz. And people are finding sweet spots with 80 hertz, 120, 200 hertz, and people get into this Kundalini state. And we find it so amazing. We have to do a study. So these guys are really onto it. Now I'm producing a prototype to go up to 1,000 hertz because they want to know what is beyond 200 hertz. So that, and we have, it is so weird. We have cases where people are gifted the electrical appliances shut off, That's so weird. So there is something to it. I'm a left brain scientist. Everything has to be in evidence, but it happens in front of my eyes, so I've got to believe it. And then we have, athletes, reporting. We're doing studies on, these are talking about non-clinical space. Athletes are reporting improved performance with a rate into the body through the nose, reporting about faster recovery from training and greater endurance and that kind of thing. So this whole thing about fluid body modulation, what you see out there, and people writing it, is actually it's true. It's supported by what we're witnessing, but we're doing it in a wearable device through the nose.
So let's cover the different ticks that you have. So you've got the alpha unit, you've got the gamma unit. That's the two main ones at the moment, and with the intranasal and the cranial unit. But let's just focus on those two waves. So let's have our listeners understand. And I also know you have a combination. So one can buy a duo, so one that has alpha and gamma. So what are the benefits of the alpha? What are the benefits of the gamma? And what's the benefit of a person buying one that has, an all-in-one package?
So if you're really sensitive, like these long-term meditators, they can feel the difference, how the alpha is impacting the brain, especially when they close their eyes, and how the gamma is doing it. And now, when we developed the alpha, it was based on an animal study done at Harvard for traumatic brain injury. So these mice were, they had a ball drop on their heads and they had brain injury, and they were looking at how they recover under this particular wavelength, which is what we use, 810 nanometers, and pulse at different frequency. And they found that at 10 hertz alpha, the mice were recovering the quickest. So they're trying to explain the alpha in a particular thing, but this is based on a measured data. So that showed us that at 10 hertz alpha is going to have a traumatic brain injury, which means that it also helps with stroke, other kinds of brain injury, and in general will help the brain recover. But I did, it actually worked. Our first early dementia trial, we used that and it produced significant results. But in the meantime, especially in the year of 2016, a number of publications came out, work done that show gamma.
Right, so before we go into the gamma, let's put a bit of emotional human perspective for our listeners, because they can't always follow the science. So when you got to, I assume you were also hands-on with this alpha experiments, correct?
Yeah, I'm part of the investigators.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what was the emotional feeling or the type of visual understanding when you see a patient or you see their family members seeing a person who's had, like, say, a stroke or dementia or Alzheimer's or brain injury, and they're using the unit, and after what period of time was there sort of this noticeable difference and the type of emotion that the family was feeling through this whole process?
Well, when I developed the first alpha, it was called a Neuro, 1010 hertz. It was a prototype. I had this woman came up to me, and I've known her for a couple of years, and she's been, she's avoided medication. She's done all this, alternative medicine and other natural therapies to help herself. She had, her brain was foggy. She had, I can see that she was cognitively impaired. She never went to the doctor. So I didn't know what it was, but she goes through bouts of depression. She said she was bipolar, and I could see that she also had infection in her, within mouth cavities, because I was melted. So, and she was having pain. She had chronic pain through her body, and imagine in the TMJ, in areas and so on. So she had tried we had intranasal at the time, and it seemed to help. But when she put on the prototype Neuro at the time, she, within minutes she was in tears and said, for the first time, I'm seeing things clearer. My pain is going away. So I said, okay. And, immediately she wanted it, and she wanted it for her brother, who was also had some kind of issue. So, so I just had to give her, a prototype because, it was helping her. And I knew I had to do this right away. So we quickly developed the alpha and so on. Now in our clinical trials, actually even before that we had an Alzheimer patient who just 1 years old, improved immediately. This was, in British Columbia. The daughter was always reporting, and her father had Alzheimer's, and she noticed a change pretty quickly. He started remembering the names of the family. He started going to email. Then we had the alpha, and now he's on the gamma. It's been more than 5 years now. When he was dependent on caregivers. Now he's driving to the grocery stores. He's doing his own shopping. He was a skilled carpenter. He reopened his workshop. So it can be really dramatic.
Wow.
And and we had, in our trials, I don't get involved in the clinical assessment because these are real clinical trials. So you have a board certified practitioner, clinician to do all that. But I get it, I get to see them in more casual, circumstances, and I hear so many stories. I get to speak to recovering Alzheimer's patients, and it is unheard of. You get stories of being in a dark place and not know where you are, and confused. And the analogy is emerging out of this into the light. Things are brighter. It is dramatic. This kind of language is really, really is very impactful, especially when you're listening to it.
Wow. And I mean, I think people need to understand it's not just, disease related to the brain. Like I would understand also neuropathy. So if our listeners out there, neuropathy is when it's kind of like frostbite in your hands and your feet, where you actually lose the ability to sense things or touch, or you don't feel pain. And, part of it's also, when we link to the brain, it's about there's a loss or missignaling of photons or light. And we have photons emitting from our head, they're coming out of our fingers and our toes. And that's kind of the reason why when we pray, we always have our hands together and we bow our heads to our hands to connect those photons. So from my understanding also with this type of treatment, it would be a very effective treatment for neuropathy patients as well.
Yeah, if you, so here published studies again, if you direct red to where you experience, say, damage to the nerves, peripheral nerves, it heals. So there's some work done, and I've seen dramatic pictures on diabetic patients. Advanced diabetes actually create damaged nerves, neuropathy, and damaged nerves, and eventually it could, lead to amputation. So that is the extent. I've seen pretty dramatic, before and after, and so on. So if you do that directly, it helps. And also, neuropathy also, say in diabetes, for example, where, some other conditions, it also involves your body, not in homeostasis. It's too much sugar in diabetes, for example. It damages your nerves. So when you can help your body systemically, it results in better balance of your hormonal system. It has better circulation. And I think, you have to take care both in the peripheral areas, which is pretty quick, and also within the whole system systemically. So we have really interesting reports. We haven't done, to be honest, clinical studies, but we receive reports of diabetic patients improving and improved blood sugar level pretty quickly, actually. And we have, just a demonstration. We have someone in the Andes in Ecuador, a practitioner, measuring where they have low oxygen. And they use just the red intranasal. I think it was the low-level laser one. They measure the change in the oxygen level through an oximeter in your fingers, and they found that the change could be as dramatic as 10% in increased oxygenation, which means that it is really going out to your peripherals and treating it. So one thing you got to know is, and you'll probably know, it's photobiomodulation. It's systemic. you can treat one side and another part of your body respond. So there is this, this signaling going on throughout your body.
Yeah, I mean, for our listeners out there, I mean, we cover on the show time and time again of how, part of the issue with, and we're going to cover the oxygen aspect of this hypoxia, is that, with non-native VMF, it lowers one's oxygen carrying potential. So that means that your ATP phase, your TCA, and your urea cycle spin rates all slow down, and your ancient pathways or secondary backer system kicks in. And this is where your glycolysis goes up, your PPP goes up, and that's sort of, it's just trying to deal with a low oxygen environment. But that's kind of the reason why we have brain fog, because, it's reducing our ability to think consciously and correctively. But when applying this red light, it helps increase the speed of the ATP and the urea and the TCA cycle, so that the body can go back into a primary function. And, you mentioned now 10% more oxygen. Now 10%, it might seem like a lot, but in terms of the systemic or the non-linear effect, it's enormous on the body. 10% is huge. It makes such a big difference on actually taking one from one level here to the next level there. And that's why you mentioned with athletic performers or sports athletes, they'll take even a 1% or 2% improvement. That's why I take, these drugs in that to just get even 2% is a difference between a gold and a silver. So it's amazing how this makes such a big difference.
Yeah, elite athletes are actually very sensitive to how the body is functioning, how the body is performing. They are at that level. And we have athletes using it. Actually, we just have one really, really well-known athlete. I can't mention his name, it's permission. But generally, they measure the body. They look at, of course, oxygenation. They use heart rate, the variability, muscle response, and that kind of thing. So they're really sensitive. We see changes now. The 10% was at the end, so there was low oxygen. So I think the change could be more dramatic. But I would say that, all these things I'm saying, they are what we, the anecdotal, we have to prove them in a robust clinical trial to be able to make a claim. So these are feedback, and, it can be, obviously people who are non-responsive. There may not be a lot, but, sometimes it depends on how they use it. But generally, as an organization, we want to go into clinical trial to prove it as much as possible. And we respect, some of their studies. Okay, there is one university that's looking at the oxygenation level and changes in the red blood cells. There are other research institutions or universities looking at, we ourselves are doing this Alzheimer's trial. There's a group in Australia getting ready to start the Parkinson's study. We are, designing studies for traumatic brain injury. We are looking at autism with another group in Florida. And, we are also looking at changes in the markers like inflammatory markers. So we're doing a bunch of things, just really trying to validate what we're doing. And we go out there, if we go out there to say that this works, we want to be able to support it with clinical data. So for non-clinical cases, we're looking at sports performance. We're looking at meditation, like I mentioned earlier. So lots, and also, reaction in a stress environment, anticipation and reaction applicable to, say, in a combat situation. So lots of stuff, we do it because we have seen early data. We want to know whether this is real, whether it's placebo. These are a lot of things we want to do. So we can feel confident going out there and say, okay, it works. But for the time being, I can only say that, I'm getting this report, that report, okay, we still got to go and prove it,
Well, I mean, with the physics and biophysics, we know it works. I mean, the math and the science, and how biology works, explained by the physics, it all works. And the thing is, I think, where people say they want that proof, like you're talking about these clinical trials, that focus on biochemistry or molecular medicine. And molecular medicine, unfortunately, they don't learn the physics, those guys, and they're not willing to learn the physics, and it becomes a much harder process. You have to work through a visual process to sort of get them to understand the allopathic medicine or the algorithmic medicine. But when you're dealing with submolecular medicine, it's a whole different understanding, and your application and the results are greatly enhanced the more you understand how to manipulate and change the treatment protocol to get these better results.
Yeah, actually, when I go out there and do, say, submit to get an approval, like, within hospitals, you get the independent review board approval, the ethics committee, and they all want to know the mechanism. So it's not that they want to know, but sometimes it can't be, fully explained. It's a good thing that in photobiomodulation, as compared to, say, this electrical stimulation to the brain or magnetic, they're not fully explained. They just know that the brain is electrical and you're doing this stimulation. But I think, and it's published as well when they did comparisons, that photobiomodulation have more better understanding of more established mechanisms in why it is working, and more is coming out now. So it is great, But
it's working with nature. When you work with nature, you always go right. But when you work against nature, you're always going to face a hard wall.
Absolutely, yeah.
So let's move on to the gamma. So we covered the alpha, how it works for certain types of treating diseases and issues. Let's go on to the gamma to help people understand where's the significance or benefit with the gamma.
So I looked into gamma when I studied, the work done in memory consolidation. And so other than meditation, which is very interesting, now when you encode memory or consolidate memory, there is anything you do, there is excitation. And when we refer to the brain, these neurotransmitters like glutamate, it stimulates, it creates these what you call sharp wave ripples. But studies have shown that when memory is properly encoded, there is presence of gamma brainwave. So it's kind of non-intuitive because people think, oh, gamma is high frequency. High frequency doesn't equate to high energy. It's different. It's just that the brain just go to this faster oscillation. And why it's happening, these studies don't fully explain it, and we are going to try and discover it. I think it involves another neurotransmitter, GABA, which has this, it neutralizes, it calms the brain. And then when you go sedated, GABA is all over. So it kind of neutralizes this overexcitation, because overexcitation causes a number of things. It causes, excitotoxicity.
Like GABA toxicity, for example.
Not GABA, that's toxicity in the brain because of overstimulation. Because like there's a drug, Amanda, in Alzheimer's, is trying to control this, overexcited, this excitotoxicity in the brain. It is out there, it's been approved for many years. Not really effective, but it's there. So GABA seems to do that, and also this pulse frequency at GABA high frequency anyway. So it shows that it is necessary to have more control in your brain. And when we did our the study that on normal brains, we are finding that this is actually this high frequency, as we invoke it, is also controlling the overstimulation of the brain. So it kind of bringing it down as well. So that's quite important. Now there was in the same year, there's a number of studies, including interesting. They also find that it controls epilepsy, the risk of epilepsy, because epilepsy is also to do with sometimes overactive brain signals. And the other thing is also published in 2016. Towards the end of it, the researchers have found that when you invoke 40 hertz, exactly 40 hertz to the brain, you modify this microglia in the brain. Microglia are these brain cells that its role is actually to help remove what doesn't belong in the brain, like this, toxins or protein deposits. For example,
CSF goes in and takes out the garbage as it comes
yeah,
out.
it modifies it to the important thing is it modifies it to they call it the M2 type, which is non-inflammatory. The microglia can be actually creates an inflammatory environment, which is not always good. Then you get into this cascade of more markers and protein and so on, how to control. So it's non-inflammatory and helps move it, and it is significant for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's because they develop, the beta amyloid plaques in Alzheimer's and these tau deposits, and in Parkinson's they have these alpha-synuclein deposits, which develop, which progress to Lewy bodies, which is they're all unwanted materials in the brain. So 40 hertz, if they can activate non-inflammatory microglia to remove this stuff, it is a good thing. So that's why I quickly developed gamma, and then on the limited number of cases, the outcomes were dramatic. We presented it in the Alzheimer's conference. But again, nobody is going to believe you, this scientists until you do a robust double-blind study, which is what we're doing.
So let's take it down to our listeners out there. We hope never to be in this position, but sometimes we get in a position where our loved one is in hospital. They could, either be a brain trauma, or it could be a concussion or a stroke, or it could be some neurodegenerative disease where they're in the ward or the ICU ward. So if they were to, the great thing, your technology, you have a great customer service. You can order the unit. It's a door-to-door courier to you very quickly. And so when your loved one's in the hospital and you're in a panic and, your doctors aren't knowing what to do, or they're just saying, we will wait and see. If a parent or a loved one is going to take control of the situation, they want to now say order the cranial intranasal duo system, which has the alpha and gamma, and they order it and they bring, it's delivered to them. They want applied now to their loved one in the hospital. What should they do, or how should they administer it for, how often, what way, what time of day, and so forth, so that they can try give their loved one a better fighting chance? Because, I've seen people, they'll spend lots of money. They'll bring an acupuncturist in. They'll bring in some weird, wiring device that says it's going to reprogram DNA or all these kind of weird things. But this is, sounds like a lot more practical and effective. And what should that loved one do when their doctor tells them, try what you want, let me see if there'll be a difference?
So if that's brain injury, and even in vegetative state, there are published papers on photobiomodulation helping vegetative state actually to have some kind of recovery. I don't have a lot of experience in that area. We have people with close ones, after an accident or something, they've gone into vegetative state, even for a long period of time. They've used it. We don't follow it until they tell us. And I did hear that, they see some improvements. We don't solicit for, feedback. And we have, people in hospital beds, even long-term care, like Alzheimer's, and usually the clinicians involved are not, they don't want to officially adopt something like this, but you are the caregivers, you are the family, you are the patient. I think for a safe device like this, non-invasive, a lot of doctors actually are fine with it. If they want safety reports, we have all the safety reports. We have to be safe to be recognized at the moment, exempted from FDA, Health Canada regulations, from regulations from a lot of places, because it is like in America, we are officially categorized as low risk general wellness. There is a guideline for that. We fall under that. And we got it confirmed with consultants and so on. When we go to FDA to approve our clinical trial, of course they've seen safety reports, so everything is okay in that part. So the clinicians may need to be, educated. So we have those reports. A lot of them are okay with it. The good thing is photobiomodulation is getting increasingly recognized. And I understand that within the next few months, there is this, I don't understand the process completely, but there is this top-level scientific committee or advisory board in the US government that recognizes certain medical terms, whether it's medicines or, for wellness or whatever. And photobiomodulation is going to be officially recognized. So in the future, there'll be some kind of code for reimbursements for insurance, health insurance purposes, and so on. So I'm very confident. It's just a matter of time. It may be soon that the medical community are going to recognize this as a legitimate modality, but whether they will recognize it to treat certain conditions or not, it will be subject to clinical studies. So I think you can go up to clinicians. They want studies. Yeah, I know they're all over the internet. I'm sure you've researched them. They're all over the place. So our device 81 safety report, fine, we have it. In Europe, they want it for CE mark. We have all those for safety anyway. So I think go to your clinicians with confidence. I think for brain injury, you will see accelerated improvement. That's my opinion.
But I think also you mentioned in the past that one doesn't, again, like with the whole power density, it's not about having more power, and we don't want to do overstimulation. So if a loved one was to administer the device on on a caregiver administer advice on their loved one, they mustn't just put it on, 24 times a day. They must just do it, once a day or every second day and progress it to not overstimulate and give the brain a chance to adapt. Or also one of the other videos, I think it was, for a more healthier person, they would use it 6 days on, 1 day off, 6 days on, 1 day off.
Yeah, that's the recommendation for even an advanced stage, say, degenerative disease like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Because, so we suggest only once a day. It shuts off automatically after 20 minutes. Because of what we've already seen, we think is enough. But in photobiomodulation, like, you don't want to keep doing it. It gets, and so we recommend, even for these advanced cases, at least take a 1 day break when you don't treat it. Allow your body to recover. Now, there are studies done too, published, and it shows that a treatment with photobiomodulation can last for weeks. Okay, think about it. It attenuates, come down, It can come down gently or plateau and come down. So as you do it again, this is another case where you have another stimulation that lasts for weeks. It depends on the body. It may be just a few hours, it may be weeks. So you keep accumulating. Imagine, it could come to a stage where your body can't handle it. So you have to allow your body to reset. And photobiomodulation does have what we call a biphasic response. They go to this curve where too low, nothing happens. Too high, also you can get plateauing or negative effect. So there is a window when it's just right.
Well, we only have one sunset a day and one sunrise a day. And even though they're both, special spectrum of red light, a sunrise has a different effect on the photobiomodulation of the body to what a sunset does. So, so our listeners need to sort of understand that, our body, our normal chronobiology or circadian signaling requires a certain signal once in a 24-hour cycle anyway. Otherwise, it's going to disrupt that homeostasis, as you mentioned earlier. So is there a particular time of day that's more beneficial to administer the treatment versus others?
We actually find that it doesn't matter. It seems to, even for sleep issues, I usually recommend, okay, do it in the evening because red, is kind of natural. We never use blue. If you ever use blue, use it only in the morning, bright, because it shuts off your melatonin, which kind of makes you sleepy. So you need melatonin when you go to bed. So we find that, it doesn't seem to matter. It doesn't even seem to matter which wavelength, as long as it's red and infrared. But, So if they want a time, I'd say, during the evening. And I know a number of people, because it's easy to use, it shuts off automatically. People use it when they go to bed. I do, because it shuts off automatically. And it's the only time I remember to use. So, yeah, I mean, that's the,
And I
it's
think
not good. Okay.
I think what's quite great about it is that the price is not everyone can make an effort to afford the unit, even the duo unit. So in South Africa, probably cost around 50,000 rand if we take into account shipping and import duties and such like. But that's the kind of money people spend on a high-end laptop. And people like to buy a new laptop every 2 years or 3 years or sometimes even every year. So to buy this unit is relatively affordable. And also, if one does have this type of disease or that's debilitating, the South African government also does subsidize the purchase of the unit against their income, so that they can use it for their ongoing treatment. So it's quite a very affordable package in that regard. But I was thinking now, I had a different guest on the show a while ago, and people always want to send their kids to university or college, and they want to buy them a fancy car or like this significant gift. And or they're buying the fancy CDs or this sound thing. But my perception, one of the best gifts they actually buy for their child is this unit, the cranial intranasal unit, because not only will it actually help them in a way, make them smarter, because how it's affecting the limbic system and they increase the EQ, but this type of technology in a way can have a type of lifetime warranty. So the only thing that has to be replaced every few years is the battery cell pack. But the lights and the other mechanisms and the drivers within the technology should last, for a great number of decades, practically.
Yeah, so I can touch on, some of the studies we're doing on, say, autism and ADHD. Now, when you have a lot of kids have attention problem, right? And very often they're diagnosed as having ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and especially there is a subset with inattentive ADHD. So there are kids, they go to school and they don't pay attention, they fall asleep, they can't remember stuff. So they score really bad in school. And I think, and actually it is shown if you do an EEG on the brain, there's high power in the low oscillation, like theta, delta, and there's low power in the high oscillation, like beta and gamma. So this is not, I'm not inventing this. When I diagnose EEG with EEG on ADHD, this is what they find, and even autism. Now, when we find that, I'm waiting for this clinical study to start, but I've already received report, kids are performing bad in school, say with the gamma. And when we did on normal healthy brains, we reduce this unwanted high power in the low oscillation when they should only be there when you go to bed and not when you're awake and trying to pay attention and trying to learn. And upregulating the power of alpha, beta, gamma. Now, hypothesis is this device, say the gamma device, 40 Hertz, can unlock. Because when you have ADHD, using an analogy, I think the kids are locked into this, doesn't matter if it's kids or adult, in this slow wave. And even if you do neurofeedback, I've got professors, we dialogue all the time. They even though it goes like 40 treatments over 6 months, they can't get 30 to 40% of the kids out of it. But with this, it's like almost immediately. So I've got people done IQ tests, IQ has gone up. So it's really, you want to make your kids perform better. You can use the gamma like an hour before an exam. And I think, the athletes have reported it, people reported it. So I got a guy who's an investor. He's been trying to invest money in the company. He's got, he used a gamma. He said he's just changed so many things. He's got Lyme disease, a bunch of things. And he does, I don't know what's board competition against like Shotoku, this board game. He's just wiping everybody off now, his competition, because the difference is really, really obvious to him. So it does help with brain performance, and I know it helps because like now I'm actually 63 years old. My brain I should be thinking about retiring and going, right into the sunset maybe and just relax. But actually, my brain performs better than when I was in my 20s. I can feel it, so for the biomodulation in the brain really helps. Uh, I think it really does mental acuity. I got so many people reporting it. Um, I haven't tested a lot of the alpha at 10 hertz. I think it does too because it helps when you relax. You need your default mode network to be in a good state. It does help that, even in intranasal. But I think for special events like you're going to sports competition where you need fast decision making, into when you go into combat video game or even for exam, I think is going to help. So we just have to, people can try it and tell me.
So with the alpha gamma duo unit, would one do both treatments at the same time, or should one space them out? What's the recommendation with that?
I actually suggest that for normal healthy brains, once every 2 days is enough for maintenance.
To use both at the same time.
One at a time.
Yeah, well, one after the other directly.
One after the other. But you can say use the gamma before an event because you're going to take you to that state. You're more prepared.
So it ends up being then a total of a 40-minute session. So 20 minutes for the alpha, 20 minutes for the gamma.
No, I would suggest just use either alpha or gamma.
Okay. So
in your routine.
So that
once every 2 days, either alpha or gamma.
All right.
But if you have is special events, say use the gamma about an hour before that event, an hour or two.
And if a person's in hospital, would you also then do, say, the 1 day alpha, the next day gamma, or would you use both on the same day?
Use the alpha in hospital. Only alpha. For brain injury. You can, do it once a day because you are not that sensitive in response. So once a day for 6 days a week.
And then the gamma, it could just be, not used as much yet, or when it's sort of needed before an activity.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got a healthy brain, the gamma can be used before an activity. Yeah. But if you're suffering from one of the neurodegenerative diseases, or you have problem encoding memory, then the gamma can be used more regularly.
And then now you also mentioned there's going to be a third technology coming out. So, tell us a bit more about that, what you can share, and when do you plan on releasing that out?
Yeah, we have, so it's been delayed because we keep trying to improve it. This is called the X Plus. It's an accessory, it can be located anywhere in your body, and it's hands-free. Now, we primarily design it as an adjunct to either the alpha or the gamma, because the alpha or gamma cannot reach the back of the brain, the cerebellum, where it controls the reflex, and stuff like some involuntary actions, also your autonomous system and your brainstem. So these are the most ancient part of your brain. We recommend it for Parkinson's because it originates with the substantia nigra, where it doesn't produce dopamine efficiently, or it just stops doing it. So that's closer to the deep part of the brain, the middle part of the brain, where this top part do not reach. If it reaches, it does it more indirectly. So when you add that to your brain, first of all, it's closer to those parts of the brain. Plus, when it triangulates with these other modules, they just go deeper, Now it can be also, it's just a device, it can also be positioned over a thymus gland, where it can stimulate the low immune system. Or now that we are getting more understanding on your gut, your microbiome in your gut, which I think now it looks looking increasingly important. If your gut, your whole body is not healthy, your brain is not healthy, especially the gut, because the microbiome, depending on its composition, if you have too much of the bad guys, like the Clostridium difficile, C. diff, it releases this neurotransmitter that reaches your brain that causes depression, or some of the theories is it is one of the reasons for autism, for example. So by reestablishing the gut composition, it can help. If you're a believer in Qigong or Tai Chi in traditional Chinese medicine, 2 inches below your navel is the Dantian, is a well of your internal energy. So that being healthy, it helps too. So we got some really sensitive people doing this. They can feel it. We believe in a chakra. There's a sacral chakra. If it combines with the headset, there's a crown and a third eye. It's more holistic response. But in any case, we're looking more into it. So this study was just published last month by, again, a group in Australia. In the animal study, they found that when they deliver red and infrared light to the gut of the mice, there's more diversity in the microbiome and more presence of these good guys. So there is something to it, and I think it's something that you want to look at further.
Yeah, this is quite important. Like you mentioned, the gut and leaky gut syndrome is, one of the more prevalent diseases coming out now is Guillain-Barré syndrome. It's where the nerves then start, or the mammalian sheets and the nerves start sort of breaking down, and then people sort of enter into a paralysis state. So applying the red light to that gut area helps the body to then start reabsorbing the necessary fats that are needed for actually remyelinating the brain and repairing those damaged nerve endings or nerves.
Sure, yeah, that's it's having the presence of enough of these fat molecules to do this work, I think is important. So we'll, so much to look at actually. Yeah.
So again, the thing is, people always think, light can't do much, or they also think, it's such a small unit, can it do such an impact? Because you have other technology out there, like for example, the Juve, which is, the whole plug-in unit. And they don't use the battery operated system because they say you can't get enough power density, and that's sort of putting full red light over the entire body, and they say there's some good incredible results, and again PBM is always going to give that. But how would one compare the Vielight to a system like the Juve?
Well, first of all, so the Juves have to penetrate the skin and all that. We have more direct contact, and when to the nose, the Juve is not going to, for externally, it's not going to go to the nose. So that's where, we are, different, we're special. So then when you do this, you need only very little power. And we always, when we ever get questioned, or anyone get questioned, look at the clinical outcomes, okay? You can argue, till the cows come home about penetration, power, laser, and all this stuff. At the end of the day, if it works, it works, right? But we know why it works. We can explain it. But that is the most obvious way of doing it. But I'm not going to say that, these other devices are not good. They are good. There's some, some of the infrared sauna, I think is a good thing. There's company that combine the infrared with infrared. Infrared makes you feel warm and comfortable. I think the infrared is better because of this photobiomodulation effect on the body. So they are good. They are just, they are not as portable, not as wearable as what we do. So, that is a big advantage. And we can understand it also because it's more targeted to, say, when you put on the certain position, we're targeting to the hubs of the default mode network, we're targeting for a certain position. So that's, biomodulation generally works systemically. But I guess, our big proposition is wearable, we design it for that kind of power enough to run a rechargeable battery to a certain state. If you use these neuro devices, keep it charged all the time. because you know, it may take a few hours to charge, but you keep it charged. It's good for the battery. When you need it, just take it off. You know, the adapter, and just put on the head, your nose, whatever.
So let's cover then. All right. So what is the warranty that comes with the unit? How many years is that?
So manufacturer's warranty is 1 year. If anything goes wrong, we usually just replace it. We don't bother to try and repair it. But there is also another, you know, we call it a performance guarantee, that nobody else does it. If you use it for anything that you want to use it for, and if it doesn't work, we give an 80% money back. You know, that's it within 6 months. So I think that is a good, you know, risk mitigation for a lot of people.
And also for that year afterwards. So I mean, we know lithium-ion batteries, they, you know, typically last about 2 years. So I assume a person can just send the unit back to you for a battery replacement, or they could maybe go to their local battery, you know, company, and they could replace the battery for them in the unit. So that seems to be much more easier in terms of maintenance. But on other, sorry.
Okay, so we actually don't use lithium ion. We use nickel metal hydride.
All right, yes.
Which is safer than lithium ion, and when you go cross-border delivery and all that, we don't have a problem. And it works just as well. It's bigger. I think the lifespan is also pretty long. But you know, if it dies after several years, you can actually move it and change this nickel metal hydride.
And are there any other components of the units that might you know, break or go faulty that one should be aware of? And you know, what's the repair costs of that after the fact?
Usually, what people do, the most vulnerable part is really the intranasal unit. You know, the cord. I've seen people having the cords chewed up by their pets, especially the dogs. And I don't know what they do with it. You know, sometimes they rough. You know, I have no idea. But there is, you know, I don't run that part of the company where they do replacement and so on, but I think we give a discount if you come back and buy a new one after the warranty period. And we upgrade all the time. So like what the applicator today is quite different from one that's a few years ago. So we strengthen it, you know, we try to make it more robust.
So as sort of a lifetime customer, one should look at buying a replacement unit or upgrade every, 5 years or 10 years, or what do you think?
No, just as long as it works, just keep it. It's meant to last longer than your lifespan, actually. The LED lasts like, you know, 20,000 hours or something. And then we've designed that the headset is pretty robust. So we've done drop tests from, I don't know, 15 feet. We don't break, we throw it around. We got it run over by trucks, you know. So they're meant to last for a long time. You know, we don't want to get customers with, you know, some companies want the customer to keep coming back and like almost like a subscription. We don't do that. But if it breaks, you know, just, you know, just come back. I think there is some discounts for returning customers. I'm not sure. So I don't want this to do with, especially for broken parts.
And then in terms of age restriction, is there a restriction age of where one can, you know, start using the unit, or can it, you know, I mean, some persons have children with very debilitating diseases or health issues when they're small. Can they put it on their 1-year-old, 2-year-old, or 3-year-old if it's needed?
Yeah, so if you want to use a neuro, the problem is the head size. It's not designed for small kids. So it can be loose, but you can do it however you can. It's just to get it, you know, deliver the photons to that part of the brain. The nasal unit is also designed for at least from teenage, you know. The applicator in the neuro is bigger because there's a microchip in there to handle the extra power. Like the 810 and the intranasal only devices, they're smaller, they're smoother. So a lot of kids are able to use it. Now the problem with kids is non-compliant. They don't like, it's not cool to have something sticking out your nose. So they use it when they're sleeping. There's one way to do it. kids, the younger you are, I would say, because especially the intranasal only, there's so low power. It's safe to use on kids, but start with once every 2 days. They shut off automatically after 25 minutes. So you can just sleeping, you just go away, it just shuts off automatically. So try that. People have used on the kids, especially when they're hyper. So it seems to work or they're not attentive. Yeah.
So Lou, I assume you're a father yourself, and I assume even close to being a grandfather, correct?
Yeah.
So how has the impact been on, passing this regiment to your children and grandchildren?
So my children, actually they're normal, healthy. They're all, generally quite intelligent. So I think they're good enough not to use this stuff, but they use it when they get ill, for example. Seems to accelerate healing, from infection. And yeah, one of them uses it because he sees it working so well on our clients because it works. He's in touch with them. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it helps particularly when they fall sick.
Mm.
Yeah.
So that would also work pretty well, I assume, for women with thyroidism issues. So you mentioned that you've got the new unit coming out that you're busy still working with. That's going to be the portable one. Will that work quite well for applying on the thyroid to help regenerate it?
Yeah, I want to. So thyroid is very sensitive. So maybe the default amount of time is too much. So if you have thyroid, start with maybe just, instead of the default time of 20 minutes, just start with 5 minutes. See how it goes and how you feel, You feel better, do a little bit more, and, until the time when you start feeling like, you're actually not benefiting, then you can just stop at a particular point. So I want to be more careful with thyroid because it's really a sensitive gland.
So this plus unit, when do you think it's going to be available for the public consumer?
Well, yeah, we are, because we're expanding its application to, all over the body. Again, we're modifying it. So it's been delayed. Hopefully we have it now it's September, maybe end of October or November. So we keep saying, okay, it's coming out. Then we find out, okay, we got to do something. We added a cooling fan to cool it because it gets warm, as some people said it. So that delayed it. Now we got this. So we're trying to improve. We want a product that's, that the user will not complain. It'll last for a long time. So that's the delay.
Well, I think, I know you're very busy. You've got a whole different aspect, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I'm sure we'll definitely have you again on the show the next year or so with the new updates and new discussions. But is there any final words or messages or comments you want to make as a super dad on our show here?
Yeah, I think, even if you don't have a problem, if you have Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, personally, although we're doing clinical trials, is just go try it, So I'm not going to say on camera that it's going to work 100%, but I've seen enough to say, yeah, go try it. Now, if you want to have, to improve your brain, make it sharper, if you have sleep problem, whatever, you just go try it. Yeah. After all, there is a money back guarantee, right? That's the problem.
True, and even if they go for the most expensive combination unit or the most high priced, that's still going to be cheaper than a year and a half's worth of supplements that people spend money on for mental intelligence type related stuff. So apart from that alone, it's already a better deal. What's it going to cost you, kind of thing.
Yeah, having said that, I've got people got off medication, got off supplements. Personally, I don't take supplements because I don't feel I need it because this is, just eat naturally, eat good natural food, unprocessed as much as possible. Do exercises and sleep enough. Do these three things and do this. I think you'll be, every year when you go and do your annual medical, I think you like what you see.
No, definitely. Thank you so much again for being on our show today. We're going to have the different aspects discussed in the show and our show notes for our listeners out there. And thank you once again for being on the show. For our listeners as well, if you do use the code JamesLech when you do your purchase, you have been personally gifted by Vielight with a 10% discount. So Lou, thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, James, well, thank you so much for speaking with me. Hope everybody enjoyed this.
For more, visit www.nicheradio.co.za.